Hello, welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be making a vintage wind-up doll costume. This is going to be the costume that I wear on Halloween. I decided that I wanted to do this around mid-August, so it's been in the works for quite a while. On Pinterest and Google Images, I found a lot of really beautiful examples of other wind-up doll costumes that people have done. There's all kinds of different styles that people have done, like more costumey and cartoony, or very realistic. A lot of real wind-up dolls actually have very small turning keys, so they're sort of supposed to be hidden, but for the sake of exaggerating this costume, the turning key is going to be quite a bit bigger so that it's easily visible. This is very commonly done with a lot of wind-up doll costumes. Something that I want to do with this costume that I don't think I've seen before is actually trying to make the turning key move. So I'm gonna rig a bit of a cardboard contraption so that the key on my back can actually be turned. Whether this is actually going to work, I have no idea. We're gonna find out. Now I'm gonna go and do a sketch of the outfit that I'd like my doll to be wearing. So let's get into the brainstorming. So here I have a light sketch of a mannequin for me to draw the clothes onto. Now, of course, as per usual, I'm gonna have a flared skirt because I can't help myself. Then for the top, I think I'm going to make a puff-sleeved blouse, and I'd like to make it with a Peter Pan collar. Editing Miranda here, I'd just like to apologize for the very faint drawing. I have a habit of drawing very lightly, so excuse that. I'm going to have the blouse button up in the front. Then for shoes, I'll just be using some shoes that I already have. The fabric that I'm going to use to make the top, I don't think is going to match very well with the fabric that I would use to make the skirt, so I'm going to have to put them together to see how they look together. And if they don't match properly, I think I might just use a skirt that I already have. Of course, the hair and makeup for this costume will do quite a bit for it. I'll probably do my usual vintage curls. Now I'm debating whether or not I want a hat, because a lot of vintage China dolls and such do have hats. You know, I think what I'm going to do is I'm gonna put a huge bow in my hair instead. I think that'll also really show a sort of scale that this doll is really small. I'm gonna have the key like right in the center of my back, so something like that. I'm going to have a seam going down the shirt, and it will not be stitched up all the way so that the key can stick through right here. And then, once I'm done with the costume, I can actually just sew up the seam and wear this shirt as a regular shirt. Now you may be wondering, how am I going to fasten the key to myself? It's gonna be on a sort of circular cardboard base. Here's the key sticking out, and I'm going to do the sort of elastic thing that is on a lot of fairy wings, but then to make it really sturdy, that is going to be attached to an elastic going around my waist. So here's the plan. The first thing I'm going to want to work on is the blouse. Now we're going to go and look at the fabrics and see how they match, and then we'll get sewing. So here's the deal. Here is the fabric I would like to make the blouse out of, and here is the fabric that I would make the skirt out of. However, they don't look great together. Actually, on camera, they look pretty nice together, but in reality, it's just a little bit weird. However, for the skirt, if I didn't use this fabric and just used this skirt that I already have, they go perfectly. As you can probably tell, this costume is going to be very pink themed, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go with the skirt that I already have, even though it has quite a few stains on it, but whatever. It's a costume, I'm fine with that. And I will use this to make myself a skirt another time, because I do still need another skirt. So for right now, let's get started making this blouse. So for most of my sewing projects on this channel, I don't actually really show you how I draft my patterns. This is mostly because most of the time my drafting process is very weird and complicated. But for this blouse, I can show you a little bit more of what I'm doing. Right here is the diagram I've drawn of how this pattern sort of works. You're basically just going to draw a rectangle that has a curve in it for the neck hole and curves in it for your armholes. That is the base of it, and then to get it to fit a little bit nicer later, we'll do some more fitting shenanigans. So the first measurement to get the width of your first pattern piece is measure around your bust. I like to do that measurement while I'm inhaling a little bit, because then there's a little bit more room in the pattern for when my ribcage is expanded. So for me that is 32 inches, so then take that measurement add 8 inches, and then divide it by 2. So for me that would be 20. Now make a rectangle using that measurement for the width, and then for the height, go from where you want your neckline to be to how long you want the shirt to be. So for that measurement, I'm gonna go with 17 inches and then add an inch for a seam allowance on both sides. I've done this on folded fabric so that when I cut it out, it'll cut out too. By the way, this drawing that I did to explain the pattern is not actually like in proportion and everything, so your actual pattern will probably look quite a bit different. And of course it'll look different depending on your body. Now next you're going to want to measure from shoulder seam to shoulder seam. This all depends on where you want your sleeves to start, so I'm just going to do it sort of in an average location. So for me that's around 13 inches, and then I'm going to add 1 inch of seam allowance. Now I'm going to take the width of my rectangle, which is 20 inches, minus my shoulder measurement, and that's including seam allowance. So 20 minus 14 inches is 6. Then I divide that 6 by 2, so 3 inches. So I'm going to mark 3 inches off of each side of my rectangle. I know there's a lot of math and it can be a little bit confusing, but stay with me. Next, measure from under your armpit to the hem length of your shirt. Don't do it from directly under your armpit, because then the seam for your sleeve is going to be right under there and that can be kind of uncomfortable. So give it a little bit of distance. So for me that's 12 inches. Now I'm going to mark 12 inches off the height of my piece. Then I've just drawn a curve between these two markings. Now you're going to want to measure around your arm where the sleeve is going to go. Give it quite a bit of extra space so that it's still comfortable to close your arm completely to your side. So for me that's 17 inches, and I'm going to add once again an inch of seam allowance, so 18 inches. I give a lot of seam allowance because I like to do felling on the inside of my garments, but you can do a smaller seam allowance if you want to. Now you're going to want to measure this curve and make sure that it matches up with half of your arm measurement. So mine is around 7 3/4, meaning it's going to be around 15.5 inches to go all the way around my arm, not to mention seam allowance. So this is definitely a little bit too small, so I'm just going to fiddle with things and add a little bit of extra length to my curve. Play around with your curve until it matches the measurements nicely, and then cut it out. Now I'm going to cut that same curve on the other side of the rectangle. Now your pattern piece should look something like this. Everyone's shoulders has a slight slope, so I'm going to cut a little bit of a slope off of this. Now currently both of these pieces look like the back piece that we need. But now I'm going to take one of these and fold it in half, and I'm going to cut a tiny bit of a neckline. And now this is our front shirt piece. Now I've layered the two pieces over top of each other again. Now I'm going to figure out where my waist is on these pattern pieces. And I'm going to take a little bit off the sides. And now I'm going to sew these pieces together along the side seams. I've done the main sewing together. I sewed along the shoulder seams and along the side. Now I'm going to try it on and we can do a little more particular fitting. As you can see, I cut a slit through the front so that I could get into it. It definitely needs to have a little bit of fitting. I definitely need to cut a little bit more out of the neckline. And there's quite a bit of extra right here, so I will get rid of that. I'll just take out these side stitches, cut a little of the fabric off, and then sew it back. There, I fixed the neckline. That's a little better. Now, one of the biggest fitting differences is doing darts under the bust. Once a little bit is taken in right there, then it fits a whole lot better. For the closure in the front, because there's not a lot of extra seam allowance here because we had to cut the piece in half, I'm going to cut out some strips of fabric, fold them in half lengthwise, and sew them along the front opening on each side. This gives us the extra fabric that we need and also gives a little bit more thickness because the fabric is folded over, so the buttons and buttonholes will be a lot stronger. So I'm going to sew some darts in the front and possibly one in the back also, and I'm going to fix the side seams, taking off this extra fabric. Then I'll come back to you and show you what it's looking like. There we go. I've got it on inside out now. I've done a lot of the altering. Now I need to add the strips of fabric in the front here, and then we'll need to add the sleeves, and we will just about be done. I think I might also need to add some extra fabric around the bottom here so that it will stay tucked into a skirt a little bit better. But overall, it is going quite well, and I like how it fits pretty nicely. Here's a diagram of the sleeve pattern that I'm going to make. It's pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not really going to go super deep into it. It's basically just a strip that will be able to go on at a slight angle. The sleeve will be gathered on each end, sewn to here, and then a cuff will be cut on the other end. If you're really not sure about sleeves, which I don't blame you because they are quite difficult, you can just do a strip of fabric and gather it. It won't fit quite as nicely, but it will function. Now let's do a little bit more sewing. It's now quite late, but I've done a lot on the top. I added the sleeves and the sleeve cuffs and the extra strips of fabric for the front opening. Also this evening, while I was watching a show, I did a little bit of finishing to the shirt. Not tons, but I did some felling on the inside of the front opening and I hemmed the collar. So tomorrow I hopefully will finish the shirt and I'll add a little bit of extension to the hem just to make sure that it doesn't come untucked from my skirt. I'll also add the buttons and start working on the Peter Pan collar. I think I'm going to make the collar out of a white material to add a little bit of contrast, so I will see you tomorrow.
The other day I chanced to meet a soldier friend of mine. He'd been in camp for several weeks and he was looking fine. His muscles had developed.
Alright, so here's the plan for the turning key on the back. I have a bunch of cardboard here from my recycling. I'd like to try and make the sort of stick, the first part that comes out of the back for the turning key. I want it to be sort of cylindrical, so that's probably going to be the trickiest part. But once I have the main shape of the turning key, I'm going to paper mache it. I have done paper maching before, but it's been a while, so we'll see how it goes. So I have a hot glue gun and lots of extra glue. I also have some super cheap modeling clay from the dollar store, so I can add some little details if I want to.
Heavily and spend the rest of my life in bed. A bugler in the army is the luckiest of men. He wakes the boys at 5 and then goes back to bed again. He doesn't have to blow again until the afternoon. If everything goes well with me, I'll be a bugler soon.
So I've got the main structure of the turning key, but now I need to make the sort of circular part that will lay against my back, and this is where I'd like to make the contraption that will help it turn. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to have a circular disc put right here, and then I will have that disc be sort of inside of another disc, if that makes sense. This is not technically attached to this yet, but it's gonna be. So I'm gonna start working on my cardboard contraption-y thing, and once that's done, I can hopefully start paper macheing. I will be using glue and water and some newspaper strips.
Oh, how I'd love to remain in bed, for the hardest blow of all is to hear the bugler call. You've got to get up, you've got to get up, you've got to get up this morning. Oh boy, the minute the battle is over. Oh boy, the minute the foe is dead. I'll put my uniform away and move to Philadelphia and spend the rest of my life in bed.
I finished paper macheing the key and I'm super happy with how it's come out. It turns actually a lot more smoothly than I was expecting it to, so that's super good. I'm gonna let it completely 100% dry overnight and then I can paint it tomorrow. I also sculpted these little pieces out of air dry clay. I have 2 of these and I will put them right there so that they can be little screws. Then I'll do all the painting over top of that and we'll add some straps. And then the costume itself will be done and I'll just have to focus on the hair and makeup and all that stuff. So I'll see you tomorrow.
Sing a song, and all the Tommies greeted him with cheers. Said that I'll sing a song about our gallant fighting men, although we've had a tough...
I finished painting the turning key, so now it's time to attach some straps so that I can actually wear it. Here is my weird strappy situation, so I'm going to try it on and see how it is. It's a little bit loose. If I tighten these a little bit, that's a little bit better. It's still always going to be like a little bit wobbly if I move, but That's fine. Now the next thing I'm gonna make is the hair bow. I'm gonna make it with this light pink scrap, and I'm going to outline it with some wire so that it really holds its big shape. I'm just gonna do this super fast with hot glue because ain't nobody got time to sew. I mean, I kind of do, but I'm just too lazy. Here is the finished bow. It's definitely very large, but I'm very happy with it. And I think this is pretty much the hairstyle I'm gonna go with too. Now the only thing left to do is do my makeup and put on the costume. I'm not a huge makeup person, at least not day-to-day makeup. However, I did used to be a dancer, so I've done a lot of stage makeup in my life, so let's hope I can do a sort of decent doll makeup look. So I don't actually own a foundation, so I'm just going to be using a little bit of my mom's foundation. It is slightly off for my entire face, so I'm just going to be putting it on my lips so that I can reshape my lips a little. I do have this Too Faced chocolate bar palette, and I think I can use one of the lighter shades here to sort of make it match my skin color a little bit better. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but the area around my lips and my lips look a little bit pinker than the rest of my face, so I'm going to try and use the shade White Chocolate from the chocolate bar palette to go over that and see if I can tone that down a bit. Now I'm going to go in with this brush that is actually an eyeliner brush, but I'm going to use it as a lip brush, and I'm going to use Midnight Red by Mary Kay to outline my lips, or more like to outline my new pretend lips. Something that you can see in a lot of vintage dolls, and even a lot of dolls today, is that their lips are very narrow. So I'm just going to squish my lips in a little bit. Now I'm just sort of blending the outline inwards because I don't want it to be quite as dark as this, because this actual lipstick straight is very, very dark. This lip color is a little bit purple tinted, so I'd like to make it a little bit more reddish pinkish, and I'm gonna go in with Retro Red by NYC. Okay, it's a little bit asymmetrical, but it's fine. I ended up going over basically the whole thing with the red, and I think on Halloween I actually am just gonna use the red and not the Midnight Red color from Mary Kay, because I don't know, I really like the red color a lot more and it has more natural tones to it. Now I'm gonna move on to something that I have barely ever even tried before because it scares me. Nose contouring. I'm gonna try and give myself a little bit more of a button nose if I can. We'll see how that goes. I'm going to use the color Semi Sweet, also from the Chocolate Bar palette. I'm gonna start this again. Okay, so what I'm gonna do instead is just a tiny bit under the nose and on these little side bits, sort of to emphasize the tip of my nose, but I'm just gonna let the rest of my nose blend into my face by itself. I think that made a little tiny difference. Moving on to the eyes. A lot of vintage dolls had painted on eyes, so there wouldn't really be a lot of shading going around the eyes. So I'm just gonna not do any eyeshadow, but I think I'm gonna do a little bit of eyeliner. Now I'm gonna use the Mary Kay Jet Black Gel Eyeliner. There is one cat eye. Okay, that is close enough. I am going to try and do some drawn on tiny little bottom lashes. I can't tell if I like that or not, but I'm just gonna go with it. You know what? I like the way that looks on camera. Up close, it's weird, mostly because I don't look like myself, but that's fine. Alright, now my eyebrows are starting to look slightly lost on my face. However, I never do my eyebrows except for occasionally when I was doing dance performances and such in the past, and I really suck at it, so with that out of the way, let's try this. They are now ever so slightly darker. Now I believe the last thing would be blush. This is a blush from 100% Pure. I think the shade is Blossom. I've put it into a vintage compact, so I'm not exactly sure. I'm applying the blush in pretty concentrated circles, and I'm not gonna blend it across my face way too much. So I think that is it for the dolly makeup. Now let's put it all together and go to the reveal. So that is the finished product of my vintage wind-up doll Halloween costume. It turned out pretty much exactly as I wanted it to, so I'm super happy to wear this on Halloween. Things I would change if I were to do this again. Honestly, for the clothes, I don't think I would change anything. I'm very happy with how the shirt and the bow came out. As far as the makeup, there are a couple things I might do differently. I think that on Halloween I am going to use just the Retro Red by NYC and not the Midnight Red by Mary Kay. I like the undertones of the NYC red better. I also am going to powder my lips after I've put on the lipstick because I don't know if you can tell, but it's kind of, my lips have kind of gone back to their actual shape because my lips pressing together has kind of spread the lipstick around over time. There is still some of the shape that I did remaining, but I would like to increase the longevity of that lip shape on actual Halloween. So basically everything I would change has to do with the makeup. But aside from that, I am absolutely thrilled, I love the result, and I hope you liked it too, and I would love to know what you're gonna dress up as for Halloween. Quickly before I finish off the video, I'd like to mention that I have an Etsy shop called Gwen's Vintage Box, where I'm selling vintage and antique curated boxes themed after different colors. The link will be in the description if you want to check it out. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Please comment, rate, subscribe, and all that jazz, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! What a shocker, the blender is on. I know there's a lot of math, and it can be a little bit... There is no strand of the universe where it is possible to not lose at least 20 needles a year. I've finished... Oop! I'm gonna step in some paint.